When we talk about body fat, most people immediately think about weight. They think about appearance. They think about what they see in the mirror or the number they see on a scale. But from a medical and scientific perspective, the most dangerous fat in the human body is not the fat you can see. It is the fat you cannot see. This hidden fat lies deep inside the abdomen. It wraps itself around vital organs such as the liver, the pancreas, and the intestines. It does not sit just beneath the skin. It presses inward, surrounding organs that are essential for metabolism, digestion, and blood sugar control. This is called visceral fat. Visceral fat is fundamentally different from other types of body fat. It is not an inert storage tissue. It is biologically active. It releases inflammatory chemicals into the bloodstream. It interferes with hormone signaling. It disrupts insulin regulation. And over time, it significantly increases the risk of serious chronic diseases, including cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, fatty liver disease, and certain cancers. One of the most important things to understand about visceral fat is this. You do not need to be overweight to have it. Many individuals with a normal body weight carry excess visceral fat internally. Their outward appearance may suggest good health, yet metabolically their bodies are under silent stress. Inflammation is elevated. Insulin sensitivity is reduced. And disease risk is quietly increasing. This is why body weight alone does not tell the full story of health. Where fat is stored matters far more than how much fat exists overall. Now here is the encouraging part. Visceral fat is also one of the most responsive types of fat in the body. Because it is metabolically active, it reacts more quickly when the internal environment of the body begins to change. When inflammation decreases, when insulin signaling improves, and when immune balance is restored, visceral fat begins to shrink. This is not speculation. This is supported by scientific evidence. Your body is equipped with powerful defense systems designed to protect you. One of the most important of these systems is the immune system. While we often think of the immune system as something that fights infections, it also plays a critical role in regulating inflammation, controlling abnormal tissue growth, and maintaining metabolic health. Excess visceral fat disrupts immune balance. It creates a state of chronic, low-grade inflammation that slowly damages tissues over time. Reducing visceral fat helps restore this balance, allowing the immune system to function as it was designed to. Over the years, research has shown that certain foods and beverages can actively support this process. Not by forcing the body into extreme states, but by gently activating natural biological pathways that already exist. One of the most important groups of compounds involved in this process is known as polyphenol. Polyphenol are bioactive compounds found in plant-based foods and beverages. Unlike calories, which simply provide energy, polyphenol act as messengers. They communicate directly with cells. They influence gene expression. They regulate inflammation. And they help guide how fat is stored and used within the body. In both clinical studies and large population analyses, diets rich in polyphenol are consistently associated with lower levels of visceral fat, improved insulin sensitivity, and reduced inflammatory markers in the blood. This matters because inflammation plays a central role in visceral fat accumulation. When inflammation is high, fat cells become resistant to releasing stored energy. They become metabolically rigid. They hold on to fat and signal the body to store more. When inflammation is reduced, the opposite occurs. Polyphenol help calm inflammatory pathways within visceral fat tissue. This makes fat cells more flexible and more responsive to the body's natural signals to burn stored energy rather than preserve it. Another critical piece of this puzzle involves the gut microbiome. Inside the human digestive system live trillions of microorganisms that influence digestion, immune regulation, and metabolism. These microbes are not passive. They actively communicate with the body and shape metabolic outcomes. Research has shown that individuals with healthier gut microbiomes tend to carry less visceral fat. Certain beneficial bacteria are associated with better blood sugar control, lower inflammation, and reduced fat storage around the organs. Polyphenols serve as nourishment for these beneficial microbes. When consumed consistently, they help shift the microbial balance toward species that support metabolic health. In return, these microbes produce compounds that improve insulin sensitivity and reduce inflammatory signaling. This is a powerful example of how what we consume does more than provide nutrients. It provides information. There is one more biological process worth understanding, and it is often overlooked. It is called angiogenesis, the formation of new blood vessels. Healthy tissues require blood vessels to function. However, unhealthy tissue growth, including the expansion of visceral fat, depends on excessive angiogenesis. As visceral fat grows, it demands an increased blood supply to sustain itself. Scientific research has demonstrated that certain natural compounds can help regulate abnormal angiogenesis in fat tissue. By limiting the blood supply that supports visceral fat growth, this fat loses its ability to expand aggressively. Over time, this contributes to a gradual reduction in visceral fat, particularly in the abdominal region. What is remarkable is that these biological effects do not require extreme measures. In many studies, consistent consumption of polyphenol-rich beverages, as simple as 1 cup per day, is associated with measurable improvements in metabolic health and reductions in visceral fat. This is not a replacement for healthy living. It is a way to support the body's natural defenses. When consumed without added sugars or artificial ingredients, this daily habit aligns with the body's biology. It reduces inflammation. It supports immune balance. And it helps shift fat storage away from the organs where it poses the greatest risk. This is not about quick results. It is about sustainable, science-based change. And when we understand how the body truly works, even a single, consistent daily choice can make a meaningful difference. When we talk about reducing visceral fat, one of the most common mistakes people make is focusing exclusively on body weight. They step on a scale, watch the number rise or fall, and assume that this tells the full story of their metabolic health. From a scientific standpoint, it does not. What matters far more than body weight is where fat is stored, particularly in the abdominal region. This is why waist circumference is such a powerful indicator of health. A growing waistline often reflects increasing visceral fat, even when overall body weight changes very little. Visceral fat accumulates around the organs, and as it expands, it alters how those organs function. The liver becomes less efficient at regulating blood sugar and cholesterol. The pancreas struggles to produce insulin effectively. The entire metabolic system becomes strained. Reducing visceral fat improves these processes from the inside out. Clinical studies consistently show that reductions in waist circumference are associated with improved insulin sensitivity, lower inflammatory markers, and reduced risk of cardiovascular disease. In many cases, these improvements occur before significant changes in body weight are observed. This is an important concept to understand. Metabolic health can improve even when the scale does not move dramatically. Now, let us return to the role of daily dietary signals. One of the reasons polyphenol-rich beverages have gained scientific attention is their ability to influence multiple biological pathways simultaneously. They do not act like medications that target a single mechanism. Instead, they create a supportive environment in which the body's own systems function more effectively. One of these systems involves blood sugar regulation. Frequent spikes in blood glucose lead to repeated insulin surges. Over time, this promotes fat storage, particularly in the visceral compartment. Polyphenols have been shown to help blunt post-meal blood sugar spikes, reducing the need for excessive insulin release. Lower insulin levels make it easier for the body to access stored fat, especially visceral fat, which is highly sensitive to insulin signaling. This is one reason why timing can matter. Consuming a polyphenol-rich beverage earlier in the day, or alongside meals, may enhance its metabolic benefits. By supporting healthier blood sugar responses, the body is less likely to direct excess energy into visceral fat storage. Consistency is another critical factor. The biological processes involved in fat reduction do not occur overnight. Inflammation does not disappear instantly. Gut microbiomes do not shift in a single day. Angiogenesis does not reverse immediately. These systems respond gradually, through repeated exposure to supportive signals. This is why daily consumption matters more than occasional use. In population studies, individuals who regularly consume polyphenol-rich beverages over months and years tend to exhibit lower levels of visceral fat and better metabolic health markers than those who consume them sporadically. Another important consideration is what is not added to the beverage. Added sugars undermine many of the benefits. Sugar increases insulin secretion, promotes inflammation, and feeds harmful gut bacteria. Even small amounts of added sugar can counteract the metabolic advantages provided by polyphenol. From a scientific perspective, consuming these beverages in their natural form, without sweeteners or artificial additives, allows the body to receive the intended biological signals without interference. There is also a long-term disease prevention component to this discussion. Excess visceral fat is strongly associated with chronic diseases that develop slowly over time. Cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, neurodegenerative conditions, and certain cancers share common underlying mechanisms: chronic inflammation, impaired immune surveillance, and metabolic dysfunction. By reducing visceral fat, you are not simply improving short-term metrics. You are influencing long-term health trajectories. Research has shown that lowering inflammation and restoring immune balance can improve the body's ability to detect and eliminate abnormal cells. This is one reason why populations with healthier metabolic profiles tend to experience lower rates of chronic disease. What makes this approach particularly compelling is that it empowers the body rather than overriding it. There is no force involved, no deprivation, no artificial manipulation. Instead, the body receives repeated, gentle signals that support its natural design. Over time, these signals accumulate. Inflammatory pathways become quieter. Insulin signaling becomes more efficient. Gut microbial diversity improves. Visceral fat begins to lose its metabolic advantage. Many individuals report that their energy levels stabilize. Cravings diminish. And abdominal fat gradually decreases, even without drastic lifestyle changes. This does not mean lifestyle factors are irrelevant. Physical activity, sleep, and overall diet all matter. But when the biological environment is supportive, these factors become easier to maintain. The central message is this: your body is constantly listening to the signals you provide. Every day it interprets information from what you consume. And over time, those signals shape your internal health. 1 cup per day may seem insignificant, but when that cup contains compounds that support immune balance, metabolic regulation, and inflammation control, its impact can be profound. This is not a trend. It is not a shortcut. It is an example of how science helps us understand the quiet power of consistency. And when we align daily habits with biology, visceral fat no longer has the same control over our health. When we consider long-term health, it is important to shift our mindset from short-term fixes to long-term biological resilience. Most chronic diseases do not appear suddenly. They develop gradually, often over years, as small imbalances accumulate within the body. Visceral fat plays a central role in this process. It is not merely a consequence of poor metabolic health. It is an active contributor. By releasing inflammatory molecules and disrupting hormonal communication, visceral fat creates an internal environment that favors disease progression rather than prevention. This is why addressing visceral fat early matters. From a scientific perspective, prevention is not passive. Prevention is an active biological process. It involves maintaining immune balance, controlling inflammation, and supporting the body's ability to regulate growth and repair. Daily habits play a powerful role in this process. The idea of 1 cup per day is not about the quantity alone. It represents consistency. It represents repeated signaling. Every time the body receives a polyphenol-rich input, it interprets that signal and adjusts its internal pathways accordingly. One signal may seem insignificant, but thousands of repeated signals shape biology. Over time, the immune system adapts. Inflammatory pathways quiet down. Metabolic flexibility improves. And visceral fat loses the environment it needs to thrive. This is how small daily choices create large biological effects. One of the most important concepts to understand is that the body is dynamic. It is constantly responding to its environment. Food, beverages, sleep, stress, and movement all send signals that influence how genes are expressed and how cells behave. Polyphenol-rich beverages stand out because they interact with multiple systems simultaneously. They do not act through a single pathway. Instead, they support a network of processes that work together to protect health. This includes immune surveillance. Immune cells are constantly patrolling tissues, looking for signs of damage, infection, or abnormal cell growth. Excess visceral fat interferes with this process by creating chronic inflammation that distracts and exhausts immune defenses. When visceral fat is reduced, immune cells regain their efficiency. This improves the body's ability to maintain tissue health over time. Another important aspect involves metabolic efficiency. As visceral fat decreases, insulin sensitivity improves. This means the body can manage blood sugar more effectively with less insulin. Lower insulin levels reduce the tendency to store excess energy as fat, particularly in the abdominal region. This creates a positive feedback loop. Improved insulin sensitivity supports fat reduction. Reduced fat further improves insulin sensitivity. Over time, metabolic health stabilizes. This is one reason why people often report feeling more energetic and mentally clear as visceral fat decreases. Energy is being used more efficiently. Blood sugar fluctuations become less extreme. The body operates closer to its natural balance. There is also a psychological benefit to understanding this process. When people believe that change requires extreme effort or deprivation, they often become discouraged. But when they understand that biology responds to consistency rather than perfection, sustainable habits become achievable. This is not about doing everything right. It is about doing the right thing regularly. 1 cup per day represents a manageable commitment. It is a habit that can be integrated into daily life without stress or disruption. And because it works with the body's natural systems, it does not require willpower to fight against biology. Instead, biology begins to work with you. From a clinical standpoint, this approach aligns with what we observe in long-lived populations around the world. These populations do not rely on extreme interventions. They follow simple, repeatable dietary patterns that support immune health, metabolic balance, and inflammation control. Over decades, these patterns translate into lower rates of chronic disease and healthier aging. This is an important point. Reducing visceral fat is not only about preventing disease. It is about supporting healthy aging. As we age, maintaining metabolic health becomes increasingly important for preserving mobility, cognitive function, and overall quality of life. Visceral fat accelerates biological aging by increasing inflammatory stress on tissues. Reducing it helps slow that process. The science consistently points to the same conclusion. When the internal environment of the body is supportive, health outcomes improve across multiple dimensions. It is also worth emphasizing that this approach does not operate in isolation. Physical activity, adequate sleep, stress management, and a balanced diet all contribute to metabolic health. But when the foundation is strong, these factors reinforce one another rather than compete. This is the advantage of working with biology rather than against it. There is no single moment when visceral fat disappears. There is no dramatic turning point. Instead, there is a gradual shift. Week by week, month by month, the internal environment changes and the body adapts. Waist circumference slowly decreases. Inflammatory markers decline. Metabolic markers improve. And most importantly, the risk of chronic disease begins to move in the right direction. This is the essence of science-based health. It is quiet. It is steady. And it is remarkably powerful. 1 cup per day is not a miracle. It is a message that tells your body to support balance rather than excess, to favor repair rather than inflammation, to promote resilience rather than decline. When delivered consistently, that message can reshape how the body stores fat, regulates energy, and protects long-term health. Visceral fat does not disappear because it is attacked. It disappears because the environment that supports it no longer exists. And that is the true power of aligning daily habits with science. When we step back and look at the full picture, one truth becomes clear. Health is not determined by a single decision, a single test result, or a single moment of effort. It is shaped by the biological signals we send to our bodies every day, often without realizing it. Visceral fat is not an enemy that appears overnight. It accumulates gradually, responding to years of metabolic imbalance, chronic inflammation, and disrupted signaling within the body. And in the same way, it does not disappear through sudden, extreme measures. It responds to consistency. From a scientific perspective, the body is remarkably adaptive. It constantly evaluates its environment and adjusts accordingly. When inflammation is high, it shifts toward storage and protection. When balance is restored, it shifts toward repair and efficiency. This is why daily habits matter so deeply. The concept of 1 cup per day is not about simplicity for its own sake. It reflects an understanding of how biology works. Repeated exposure to beneficial compounds sends a clear message to the immune system, the metabolic system, and even the genetic level of cellular function. Over time, those messages compound. The immune system becomes less reactive and more precise. Inflammatory pathways quiet down. Insulin signaling becomes more efficient. And visceral fat, which depends on inflammation and excess signaling to survive, gradually loses its advantage. What is especially important to understand is that this process does not require forcing the body into stress. In fact, excessive stress, whether from extreme dieting, overtraining, or metabolic shock, often produces the opposite effect. Stress hormones encourage visceral fat storage as a protective response. Working with biology means reducing unnecessary stress, not increasing it. This is where science offers reassurance. When we align daily choices with evidence-based mechanisms, immune balance, gut health, angiogenesis regulation, and metabolic flexibility, the body begins to respond naturally. It does not resist. It does not fight back. It adapts. And adaptation is where long-term health lives. From a clinical standpoint, this approach reflects what we see in populations that age well. They do not rely on dramatic interventions. They follow consistent patterns that support internal balance. Over decades, these patterns translate into lower rates of cardiovascular disease, diabetes, and metabolic disorders. This is prevention in its truest form. Not the absence of disease but the presence of resilience. Reducing visceral fat is not only about improving measurements or laboratory values. It is about protecting the organs that sustain life. The liver, the pancreas, the heart, and the immune system all function more effectively when they are not compressed and inflamed by excess internal fat. As visceral fat decreases, the body regains space, both physically and metabolically, to function as it was designed to. This also reframes how we think about progress. Progress is not always visible immediately. It does not always show up on the scale. Often it begins internally. In improved blood sugar regulation. In reduced inflammatory markers. In better energy stability throughout the day. These are early signs that biology is shifting in the right direction. With time, those internal changes become visible. Waist circumference decreases. Abdominal fat softens. Metabolic markers improve. But by the time these changes appear externally, the most important work has already been done inside the body. This understanding removes urgency and replaces it with confidence. Confidence that the body knows how to heal when given the right signals. Confidence that small, consistent habits matter more than perfection. Confidence that health is a process, not a deadline. 1 cup per day may seem modest, but biology does not respond to drama. It responds to repetition. And when repetition aligns with science, the effects can be profound. This is not about promising outcomes. It is about explaining mechanisms. Science does not guarantee results. It explains why results become possible. When inflammation is lowered, visceral fat becomes vulnerable. When insulin sensitivity improves, fat storage shifts. When immune balance is restored, long-term protection increases. These are not theories. They are observations supported by decades of research. The most important message to take away is this. Your body is not failing you. It is responding to the information it receives. When you change the information, when you provide signals that support balance rather than excess, the body adjusts accordingly. Over time, those adjustments accumulate into meaningful change. Visceral fat does not disappear because it is attacked. It disappears because the environment that supports it no longer exists. And that is the quiet power of science-based health. Not force. Not extremes. But understanding. 1 cup every day is not a cure. It is a conversation with your biology. And when that conversation is consistent, informed, and aligned with evidence, the body listens.